Notice it's a totally scalable model, right? We can have this much, but we can also just put that away for now, that whole big thing that we've got, right? And then we can try to think about what are we going to do in our introduction and our conclusion, right? How are we going to do this? And this is something you should be doing at the beginning of writing, of course, and something you can very safely do in the middle of writing, like just rewrite your introduction halfway through, and then certainly go back and write your introduction at the end. Because at that point, you know exactly what you're going to say. So I'm going to suggest to you something. I'm going to propose a way of doing this, which lets you write an introduction to any research paper in 3 paragraphs. And those of you who follow my writing process advice will know that this will then take you exactly 1.5 hours to write, 27 minutes at a time with 3-minute breaks. You will write no more than 600 words and no less than 18 sentences. Right? If you do this exactly the way I tell you, right? And you only have to know 3 things to write this, right? So you have to have kind of 3, you have to make up your mind that 3 things are true, right? In order to write these 3 paragraphs. And if you can write these paragraphs, you are really well based, as it were, to write the rest of your paper. Right? So the first thing you want to make sure that you know something about is the world. Now, yes, in a sense, the whole thing, right? You want to know why your paper is relevant in the world in which we live, right? So this is where you say something like, the internet has changed the way businesses communicate with their customers, right? Sounds pretty obvious, pretty boring, right? But notice that if you know something about internet marketing, right, then you can write an interesting paragraph of at least 6 sentences and at most 200 words that says only one thing, which is that the internet has changed the way businesses communicate with their customers. You can explain how it has changed, right? You can explain when it really took off, right? You can explain how much it has changed, right? So you can tell a nice story there. You can provide some interesting statistics. You're in control of that space, right? What you're doing is you're meeting the reader. It'll take about a minute for the reader to read this paragraph. It is the first minute of your reader's attention, right? And you address yourself to it, right? And keep in mind that what you decide the day before, we live in a world that is like this, and because the world is like this, it needs my research paper, right? Right? We live in this world, and it needs my research. But I'm not going to talk about my research yet. I'm just going to describe the world. And I'm going to describe it in a way that is recognizable to my reader. So the world is going to be not some weird, crazy place, right? It's going to be a place that is common, familiar, and recognizable. It's a common place to start. But it's going to be interesting, right? I'm going to show the reader that I'm an interesting person, that I know not just banalities about this, I know interesting facts about this world that we live in. Right? Make sense? Step 1, write about the world. Step 2, write about the science that studies that world. And keep in mind that this is your science. It's your discipline, right? So don't talk about those scientists that are don't make this all, don't alienate yourself from your own expertise, right? Step into it. We scientists, we researchers working in this area, right? We know this about that world that I've just described, right? So we marketing theorists know this about the internet, right? And there's 2 general approaches you can take. It's quite straightforward. The first one, you probably recognize this. What you do is you say we all agree, right? So marketing theorists in general agree that the internet has had a positive effect on businesses' ability to communicate with their customers, right? It could be a total, very nice agreement. Everybody starts with that, and then the conversation proceeds from that consensus. Right? But just as common is that a discipline, a science, can be founded on a controversy. So there can be a disagreement within the community about what exactly is, whether or not it's good or bad, right? Whether the internet has made life easier for businesses or harder for businesses, because now they have a reputation management problem, right? So maybe there is a struggle within the discipline that you want to announce. And remember, this is the second minute of your reader's attention. You again want the reader to recognize these theories, because remember, they're the theories you'll be explaining in more in depth in your theory section, right? And you also want them to recognize even the controversy. So the fact that there's a controversy shouldn't be controversial, right? The reader should recognize, oh yeah, we argue about this all the time. Every time we talk about this, we have this argument, right? The reader should recognize that there's a disagreement, right? 2 paragraphs, 1 hour's worth of work so far, 2 minutes of worth of reading experience that we've created, no more than 400 words, right? 200 for each paragraph at most. And notice that you haven't talked about yourself yet. You've just avoided the most boring start of any research paper, which is this paper is about, right? Do not start your papers that way, and you've just completely avoided it, right? By starting us in a world and in a shared discipline, a shared scientific specialty, right? And so now you have earned, as it were, the right to write about yourself, about your paper, right? And here, this is where it gets really granular. I'm going to tell you how to write this paragraph basically down to the sentence, right? So you'll have a really, really tight way of doing exactly this paragraph. And this is how you do it. This sentence is the fundamental structuring principle of academic life, right? This paper shows that, and then your conclusion. And notice that the C there, right, stands for a complete sentence, and that'll become important later, right? It doesn't show that something and then something non-grammatical, right? The C is a grammatically well-formed sentence that is true, right? It better be, right? And it's probably the most truest thing in your entire paper, right? It's the thing that you know better than anybody else. Right? And I'll explain to you exactly how that works. And then what you do now is you say what it's based on. So you summarize your methodology, right? You say it's based on 27 semi-structured interviews with middle managers at 3 different levels in 2 different teams, right? The analysis reveals that they are very dissatisfied with their level of top-down management in this company, right? So you're going to start summarizing your analysis. Right? This has, and you can even add, I've left it out here because I don't want to give you too much encouragement, but you can even say this has profound implications, right? For how organizations are managed in the future, or for how we think about sense-making, or whatever it is that we, how it is we're going to go with that. So this is where we summarize our discussion, right? And those sentences there, this paper shows that it is based on the analysis reveals, and this has implications for. This all stands for something that happens in a single paragraph of no less than 6 sentences and no more than 200 words, right? If you can write that paragraph, I'm sure you can imagine you feel strong, right? That is a good paragraph to be able to write. And so it's a good paragraph to go back to every once in a while. And if you're working in groups, it's a great paragraph to have a lot of discussions about, right? To really get clear about this is what we're going to say, right? This is what we're going to claim our methods gave us, right? This is how we're going to summarize our analysis in about 3 sentences. If you want to do the math on this, this paper shows that that's 1 sentence. It is based on 2 sentences of methodology, right? So now we're up to 3, right? The analysis reveals, you can probably do that in about 3 sentences. Now we're up to 6, and then a 7th sentence. This has implications, maybe an 8th. So about 2 sentences that give you the summarize the discussion. You've got 8 sentences there, right? 27 minutes, 3-minute break, get on with your day, right? It's a nice feeling. You feel like you've done something that day if you've written that paragraph. It's like going for a run. Notice something very, very important. Way down, paragraph 79 or something, right? Not the very last paragraph, but maybe the second to last paragraph, or the first paragraph of your conclusion, like way back at the end. You have to write your conclusion. And a good way of doing that is simply to announce, again, your conclusion, just to state your conclusion, right? And then just support it with information from your analysis, right? And remember what's happening here is you've introduced this world to the reader. You've said we share this scientific basis for understanding this world. You've told the reader what you're going to say, right? Then you've spent 70 paragraphs unpacking all of that, right? So now the reader really knows what you're talking about. At this point, you want to give them the gift of common understanding, right? Really giving this at eye level. And so where you're just going to say, this is the hardest way I know how to say this, the most efficient way I know how to say it, using all the biggest words that are relevant to this, right? Assuming that all my data is good, right? I'm not going to be apologetic about my data, right? So I'm just going to say it in a very strong and direct way to the most well-informed, knowledgeable, intelligent, and friendly reader that I can imagine. So you're basically saying it the way you would say it to yourself or to your writing partner, right? So this is how you say things within your own writing community. This is really where you've arrived when you get to this, right? Does that make sense? Now we got 4 paragraphs, and again, 4 paragraphs that are really nice just to practice and return to and have discussions about in your group, right? Because they are the structuring part of this thing.